Nexus Station 7 floated in the darkness of space like a massive wheel of light and metal. It was home to over 50,000 beings from dozens of different species. The station served as a trading hub and diplomatic center where aliens from across the galaxy came to do business, make deals, and try to live together in peace. In the civilian quarter of the station, the Torrance family had made their home for the past 2 years. Marcus Torrance stood at the wide window of their apartment, watching ships come and go from the docking bays. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and careful eyes. He had served in the Human Defense Coalition for 15 years before retiring to take this civilian position as a security consultant. His wife, Yuki, worked as an engineer in the station's maintenance division. She was brilliant with machines and had quickly earned respect from her alien co-workers. Their daughter, Emma, was 8 years old. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's curious nature. She loved living on the station because there were so many different aliens to meet and learn about. She had friends from 6 different species and could say hello in 12 different languages. That morning started like any other. Emma ate her breakfast while her robotic pet, a small floating sphere she had named Zippy, buzzed around the kitchen. Marcus reminded her to stay in the civilian areas and not wander into the restricted sections. Yuki kissed her daughter's forehead and headed off to work. Emma grabbed her tablet for school and headed out with Zippy following close behind. The station's main promenade was always busy in the mornings. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the wide corridors. There were the tall, bird-like Avolians with their colorful feathers, the short, stocky Kryn who looked like walking rocks, the graceful Pelthrians who moved on 6 legs, and many others that Emma had learned to recognize. The station was patrolled by the Vraxian Constabulary. The Vraxians were a proud species who valued order and rules above all else. They stood nearly 7 feet tall with gray skin and sharp features. They wore dark blue uniforms decorated with symbols of rank and authority. The Vraxians had been given the job of keeping peace on the station by the Galactic Council. Most species respected the Vraxian officers, but many humans found them cold and dismissive. The Vraxians made no secret that they viewed humans as newcomers to the galactic community. Some Vraxian officers called humans primitives or backwater apes when they thought no humans could hear them. Marcus had warned Emma to be polite to all the officers, but to keep her distance when possible. Emma walked through the promenade on her way to the education center where human and alien children learned together. Zippy suddenly spotted something interesting and zoomed ahead. The little robot had a habit of chasing anything shiny. "Zippy, wait!" Emma called out, laughing as she ran after her pet. She didn't see the Vraxian officer until it was too late. Emma bumped right into him, bouncing off his legs and stumbling backward. The officer was Kralvin, a high-ranking constable known for his strict enforcement of every rule. He was carrying an ornamental data tablet, a status symbol among Vraxian officers. When Emma bumped into him, the tablet fell from his hands and hit the floor. The screen cracked with a sharp sound. Emma looked up at the tall alien, her eyes wide. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. I was chasing my robot and—" Kralvin looked down at his broken tablet, his face twisted with anger. "Stupid human spawn!" he snarled. "You dare damage my property?" "I really didn't mean to," Emma said, her voice shaking. "I can ask my mom to fix it. She's really good with—" The officer's hand moved so fast that Emma didn't even see it coming. He struck her across the face with the back of his hand. The blow lifted Emma off her feet and sent her crashing to the floor. Her nose exploded with pain and blood began pouring down her face. She could taste copper in her mouth. The promenade went silent. Dozens of beings had witnessed what just happened. Some gasped, others simply stared. A few quickly looked away and hurried off, not wanting to get involved. Emma lay on the floor, crying and bleeding. She couldn't understand what had just happened. She had said sorry. It was an accident. Why did he hit her? Marcus had been walking about 50 meters behind his daughter, giving her some independence but keeping her in sight like he always did. He saw everything. He saw Emma bump into the officer. He saw the tablet fall, and he saw Cralvin strike his little girl. Something cold and dangerous flooded through Marcus's body. His military training took over. He crossed the distance in seconds, moving faster than most beings thought humans could move. Cralvin was still standing over Emma, looking satisfied with himself. When Marcus reached him, Marcus grabbed the Vraxian's arm and twisted it behind his back with practiced efficiency. He swept the officer's legs out from under him and slammed him face first onto the floor. He put his knee on Cralvin's back and held him there. Every instinct screamed at Marcus to keep hurting this creature who had hurt his daughter. But he controlled himself. Barely. "Don't move," Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet. "Someone call medical. Now." Other humans in the crowd rushed forward. One woman knelt beside Emma, using her scarf to stop the bleeding from the girl's nose. Another man helped Marcus keep Cralvin pinned down. Within minutes, station security arrived. But what happened next shocked every human present. The security team was led by another Vraxian officer named Tolvan. He assessed the situation quickly. He saw Emma bleeding on the floor. He saw Cralvin pinned down by Marcus. And he saw all the witnesses standing around. "Release Officer Cralvin immediately," Tolvan ordered. Marcus looked up, not believing what he was hearing. "This officer just assaulted my daughter. She's 8 years old. He struck her without provocation." "I said release him," Tolvan repeated, his hand moving to his weapon. Marcus wanted to argue. He wanted to fight. But more security was arriving, and his daughter needed medical attention. Slowly, he released Cralvin and stood up with his hands raised. Cralvin got to his feet, brushing off his uniform. "I want this human arrested for assaulting an officer," he said. "No," Marcus said, unable to believe what was happening. "He hit my daughter. Everyone here saw it." Tolvan turned to the crowd. "Did anyone witness this alleged assault?" Most of the aliens looked away. Some simply left. A few humans spoke up, saying they saw Cralvin strike Emma, but their testimony seemed to mean nothing to Tolvan. "The human female collided with Officer Cralvin and damaged his personal property," Tolvan said, as if reading from a script. "Officer Cralvin responded with appropriate corrective action. The human male then violently assaulted an officer of the law. Arrest him." 2 security officers grabbed Marcus. He didn't resist, but his eyes burned with rage. "This isn't over," he said to Cralvin. Medical personnel arrived and took Emma to the station hospital. Yuki received an emergency call at work and ran to be with her daughter. She found Emma lying in a hospital bed with a broken nose, severe bruising across her face, and a concussion. The little girl was sedated, but kept crying in her sleep. When Yuki learned that Marcus had been arrested instead of Cralvin, she felt something break inside her. She was a peaceful person. She believed in following rules and working through proper channels. But this was wrong. This was so deeply wrong that she couldn't accept it. She went to the station administrator's office. Administrator Veltoth was a Pelthrian, a species known for being cautious and diplomatic. He listened to Yuki's complaint with what seemed like sympathy. "I understand your distress," Veltoth said carefully. "But Officer Cralvin has diplomatic immunity as a member of the constabulary. He cannot be prosecuted under station law." "He struck my daughter," Yuki said, her voice shaking. "She's a child. She weighs 30 kilograms. He could have killed her. I am told the child damaged valuable property, and that the officer's response, while perhaps excessive, was within his authority to maintain discipline." "She's 8 years old." Veltoth shifted uncomfortably. "I will file a formal complaint with the Vraxian Constabulary. Officer Cralvin will receive a citation for excessive response. Your husband will be released with a warning. I believe that is the best resolution for all parties." A citation? Yuki could barely speak. My daughter has a broken nose and a concussion, and he gets a citation? I am sorry, Veltoth said, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. That is how the law stands. Yuki left the office feeling like she was drowning. She went to the Galactic Council's local representative next. Zixara was a senior member of the council who handled disputes on Nexus Station 7. The meeting went no better. Your child's injuries, while unfortunate, are relatively minor by galactic standards, Zixara said. Many species are far more durable than humans. What you consider a serious injury might be barely noticeable to a Vraxian or a Kryn. You must understand that different species have different tolerances. So because we're more fragile, it's okay to hit us? Yuki asked. I did not say that. I merely point out that Officer Kralvin may not have realized how vulnerable human juveniles are. This is a cultural misunderstanding more than a criminal matter. My daughter said she was sorry. She tried to apologize. He hit her anyway. Zixara's expression didn't change. The matter has been reviewed and resolved according to proper procedure. I suggest you accept this and move forward. Pursuing this further will only cause more problems for your family. Yuki returned to the hospital feeling helpless and furious. She sat beside Emma's bed, holding her daughter's small hand. Marcus had been released, as promised, and he sat on the other side of the bed. His jaw was clenched so tight that Yuki worried he might break his own teeth. They're not going to do anything, Yuki said quietly. They don't care that she's a child. They don't care that it was an accident. They protect their own, and we're just humans. Marcus stared at his daughter's bruised face. There has to be something we can do. Maybe Earth can help, Yuki said. Maybe if we contact the Human Defense Coalition or the Diplomatic Corps, they can put pressure on the Council. It was a desperate hope, but it was all they had. Yuki went back to their apartment and sent a detailed message to Earth. She included medical records, witness statements, security footage that she had managed to obtain, and a formal request for legal assistance. She sent it through official channels to the Earth Diplomatic Service. But she also sent a copy to another address. Her brother worked in communications for the HDC. He had once told her that if she ever had a real emergency, there was a special department that handled incidents involving human citizens in foreign space. She had never thought she would need it. She sent the message to that department, too. For 2 days, nothing happened. Emma was released from the hospital, but she didn't want to leave their apartment. She was scared of seeing Vraxian officers. She had nightmares every night. Marcus stayed home with her while Yuki went to work, though she could barely concentrate on her job. On the 3rd day, Yuki received a message on her personal communicator. It was short and came from an unknown sender. The message contained only a single line of text. Confirmed. Package en route. ETA 72 hours. Yuki showed the message to Marcus. They didn't know what it meant. They didn't know who sent it. But for the first time since the incident, Marcus smiled. Someone's coming, he said. Who? Yuki asked. I don't know. But whoever they are, they're coming for Emma. They're coming for us. Outside the station, far beyond the range of normal sensors, a small ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. It was unmarked and unremarkable. It matched the profile of 1,000 other human cargo vessels that pass through this region every week. Station traffic control gave it a standard approach vector and thought nothing of it. The ship was called the Consequence. And everything was about to change. The Consequence docked at Nexus Station 7 without ceremony. The station's traffic control logged it as a civilian transport requesting standard services. The manifest listed 6 passengers with diplomatic credentials. The docking fees were paid promptly. Everything appeared normal and routine. Administrator Veltoth was reviewing supply reports in his office when his assistant informed him that representatives from Earth had arrived requesting a meeting. He felt his stomach tighten. He had hoped the Torrance incident would simply fade away, but it seemed Earth was not willing to let it go so easily. "How many representatives?" Veltoth asked. "6, Administrator. They have proper diplomatic papers. I could delay them if you wish." Veltoth considered this. Making Earth's diplomats wait would be an insult, and that might escalate things further. He was learning that humans took insults seriously. "No, send them in." The door opened and 6 humans entered. Veltoth had met many humans during his years on the station, but these were different. They moved with purpose and confidence. 5 of them wore simple gray uniforms with no obvious military markings, but Veltoth's instincts told him these were soldiers. The 6th wore a formal black suit. The woman leading them stepped forward. She was perhaps 40 years old, with short dark hair and alert eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the room at once. She extended her hand in the human greeting gesture. "Administrator Veltoth, I am Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Coalition. This is Lieutenant James Park, our Judge Advocate General Officer. We're here regarding the assault on Emma Torrance." Veltoth awkwardly shook her hand, noting her grip was firm but not threatening. "I was not aware Earth was sending military personnel. This is a civilian matter." It became a military matter when station authorities failed to provide justice to a human citizen, Chen said calmly. "May we sit?" They arranged themselves around the conference table. Chen and Park sat directly across from Veltoth. The other 4 humans positioned themselves near the door and walls. They said nothing, but their presence was intimidating. Lieutenant Park opened a data tablet and projected a holographic display. "We have reviewed all available evidence regarding Incident 7 Alpha 392. Security footage shows Emma Torrance, age 8 standard years, accidentally colliding with Officer Kralven. She immediately apologized. Officer Kralven then struck her with sufficient force to cause significant injuries, including a broken nose, facial contusions, and a concussion. The officer filed a report stating the child damaged his property and required discipline," Veltoth said, though his voice lacked conviction. "She's 8 years old," Chen said quietly. "She weighs 32 kilograms. She was chasing her pet robot. It was clearly an accident. I understand human concern for juveniles is perhaps stronger than in some species." "No," Chen interrupted, her voice still calm but now edged with something dangerous. "This isn't about human feelings. This is about a grown adult in a position of authority striking a child who posed no threat. That is wrong by any reasonable standard." Park continued. "We have witness statements from 17 beings who observed the incident. 12 are non-human. All confirm that Emma Torrance posed no threat and that the use of force was unprovoked and excessive." Veltoth shifted in his seat. "Officer Kralven has diplomatic immunity as a member of the constabulary. The Galactic Council has reviewed the matter and determined it was handled appropriately." "Then the Galactic Council made a mistake," Chen said. "We are formally requesting that Officer Kralven be remanded to human custody to face charges under the Sapient Protection Act. This act, which Earth has proposed multiple times to the Council, makes the assault of juveniles a serious crime regardless of species. The Council has not ratified that act." "Then they should have," Chen said. "But that doesn't change what happened. Emma Torrance is a human citizen. She was assaulted. We are here to ensure justice is done." Veltoth felt trapped between 2 bad options. He knew the Vraxians would never agree to hand over one of their own, but he also knew that refusing Earth outright might cause an incident. "I will forward your request to Council Representative Zixara and to the Vraxian Constabulary leadership. I'm sure we can find a diplomatic solution that satisfies all parties." "We're not interested in diplomatic solutions that don't include justice," Chen said. "We want Officer Kralven to face consequences for his actions. You have 24 hours to transfer him to our custody." "And if we refuse?" Veltoth asked, though he immediately regretted the question. Chen stood up, The other humans did the same. Then we will be forced to pursue other options. We came here hoping to handle this through proper channels. We still hope we can. But make no mistake, Administrator, one way or another Officer Kralvin will answer for what he did. The humans left without another word. Veltoth sat alone in his office, feeling a deep sense of dread. Something about Commander Chen's calm certainty had been more frightening than any threat could have been. He immediately called for an emergency meeting with Zixara and Constabulary Commander Vekthar. They met within the hour. "The humans are demanding we hand over Kralvin," Veltoth explained. "They seem quite serious about this." Vekthar was a large Vraxian who had commanded the station's security forces for 6 years. He laughed at Veltoth's concern. "Let them demand. They have no authority here. This is Council space, under Council law." The human child damaged property. Kralvin corrected her behavior. The matter is closed. "They said they would pursue other options if we refuse," Veltoth said. "Empty threats," Vekthar said dismissively. "Humans are emotional creatures. They make noise, but they always back down when faced with real authority. I've dealt with dozens of human complaints. They bluster, we refuse, they eventually accept it and go away." Zixara was less certain. Commander Chen did not seem to be bluffing, and they brought military personnel to what should be a diplomatic matter. 6 humans, Vekthar said with a sneer. "Against an entire station? If they attempt anything, my security forces will handle them easily." But Veltoth spent the next hours researching. He accessed the Galactic database and began reading about human military history. What he found disturbed him deeply. Humans had a reputation across the galaxy as Deathworlders, beings from a planet so dangerous that it had forged them into something harder and more violent than most species. But he was learning it was more specific than that. He found incident after incident where human military forces had launched operations to rescue their citizens. They had assaulted fortified positions to free a single hostage. They had pursued kidnappers across entire star systems. They had gone to war over insults to their people. And throughout their own history, even before they reached space, humans had shown an almost irrational dedication to protecting children. Veltoth found one particular incident from Earth's history before they had faster-than-light travel. A group of criminals had taken children hostage in a building. Human military forces had stormed the building, accepting casualties to themselves in order to save those children. They could have waited or negotiated, but they had chosen immediate action. Every child had survived. The more he read, the more worried he became. But when he tried to share his concerns with Vekthar and Zixara, they dismissed him. "You're being paranoid," Vekthar said. 6 humans cannot threaten this entire station. We have over 200 security personnel, military-grade weapons, and the backing of the Galactic Council. The humans will complain, we will refuse, and in a few days, they will go home. That evening, Kralvin gave an interview to the station's news network. The journalist was a Pelthrian who asked careful questions about the incident. "The human spawn ran into me and destroyed expensive equipment," Kralvin said, sounding annoyed. "I administered appropriate discipline. If humans cannot control their offspring properly, they should not bring them into civilized spaces. The child got what she deserved for her carelessness." "Some observers say your response was excessive," the journalist noted. "Excessive?" Kralvin laughed. "I barely touched the creature. If anything, I was too gentle. Humans are emotional primitives. They coddle their young too much. A little discipline would do them all good. These apes need to learn their place in the galaxy." The interview was broadcast across the station. Every human who saw it felt a cold rage building in their chest. Marcus Torrance watched it with Yuki and had to leave the room before he put his fist through the wall. But someone else was watching too. Commander Chen watched the entire interview from her ship. Her expression never changed, but Lieutenant Park noticed her hands gripping the armrests of her chair hard enough to leave marks. "He just made this personal," Park said quietly. "It was always personal," Chen replied. "He hit a child, but now he's bragging about it. Now he's calling us primitives and apes. He thinks there will be no consequences. The 24 hours aren't up yet. They might still hand him over." Chen shook her head. "They won't. The Vraxian commander thinks we're bluffing. The council thinks they can dismiss us. They're about to learn a very hard lesson." She opened a communication channel. "This is Chen to Orbital Team. Status?" a voice responded. "Package deployed and operational. We have control of the systems we need, awaiting your signal. Stand by." Chen switched channels. "Chen to Task Force Actual. Please report." "This is Actual. 2 destroyers and 4 frigates standing by at designated coordinates. We are ready to move on your order." Chen looked at the countdown timer on her screen. 18 hours remained until her deadline. She knew the station authorities would not comply. She had known from the beginning, but she had to give them the chance. She had to try the diplomatic route first. That was what separated humans from monsters. They tried peace first, but when peace failed, they were very, very good at war. Park was working on his tablet, reviewing laws and regulations. "If we do this, there will be political consequences. The Council could sanction Earth. They could restrict human trade rights." "Let them try," Chen said. "They'll learn that you don't get to hurt our children without consequences. Not in Council space. Not anywhere." In his quarters, Kralvin was feeling quite pleased with himself. His interview had been broadcast widely. His fellow Vraxians had sent him messages of support. Commander Vekthar had personally congratulated him for standing up to human arrogance. He felt vindicated and important. He had no idea that a human stealth satellite was currently in orbit above the station, invisible to the station's sensors. He had no idea that 6 human warships were quietly moving into position. He had no idea that Commander Sarah Chen had already written the operation orders that would change his life forever. The deadline approached. Veltoth sent several messages to Commander Chen, trying to negotiate or at least buy more time. She responded to each one with the same message. "Transfer Officer Kralvin to human custody. 24 hours, no negotiation." With 1 hour remaining, Veltoth made a last desperate call to Earth's main diplomatic service. He spoke with an ambassador who seemed genuinely sympathetic but unhelpful. "I don't control the military," the ambassador said. "If Commander Chen is there with authorization to act, then she has support from the highest levels of our government. Administrator, I suggest you give them what they want. We are very serious about protecting our children." "But the Council made a mistake. They had a chance to do the right thing. If they refused, well, sometimes my government decides to handle things directly. I'm sorry I can't help you more. Good luck." The call ended. Veltoth stared at his communication console, feeling helpless. He sent one final message to Zixara and Vekthar, begging them to reconsider. Both refused. The deadline passed. For exactly 3 minutes, nothing happened. Veltoth began to hope that maybe the humans had been bluffing after all. Maybe they would leave peacefully. Then every light on the station flickered and went dark for half a second. When they came back on, a message was being broadcast on every communication channel, every screen, every display on the station. Commander Chen's face appeared. Her voice was calm and clear. "Attention Nexus Station 7. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Coalition. You were given 24 hours to transfer custody of Officer Kralvin for his assault on Emma Torrance. That deadline has passed. We tried diplomacy. Now we enforce consequences. All non-combatants in Sections 7A through 7D should evacuate immediately. You have 5 minutes," the message repeated. Veltoth stared at the screen in horror. What have they done? The 5 minutes of warning time felt like an eternity to Administrator Veltoth. He frantically tried to contact Commander Vekthar, but the communication lines to the Vraxian security headquarters were suddenly filled with static and interference. Around the station, civilians in sections 7A through 7D were running for the exits, confused and frightened by the sudden evacuation order. Kralven was in his quarters when the message played. He stood up, outraged that humans would dare threaten a council station. He reached for his communication device to call Commander Vekthar, but the device was dead. He tried the door controls. They didn't respond. He was locked in. "What is this?" he shouted at the door. "This is illegal! You cannot do this!" The lights in his quarters went out, replaced by dim emergency lighting. Then he heard sounds from outside. Running footsteps, shouting in Vraxian, the sharp crack of weapons firing. Then silence. His door suddenly blew inward with a flash of light and a bang that left his ears ringing. 3 figures in dark armor moved into his quarters with smooth, practiced efficiency. They wore helmets with reflective visors that hid their faces, but Kralven knew they were human. He could tell by the way they moved. "Officer Kralven," one of them said in perfect Vraxian, "you are under arrest for assault on a minor. You will come with us peacefully, or we will carry you. Choose now." Kralven reached for his sidearm, but one of the humans moved faster than he thought possible. A hand locked around his wrist with crushing force. His weapon was taken before he could even draw it. Another human pressed something against his neck, and he felt all the strength leave his body. He collapsed forward and was caught before he hit the ground. "Subject secured," one of the humans said into a communication device. "Moving to extraction point." They carried Kralven out of his quarters into a corridor that looked like a war zone. A dozen Vraxian security officers were sprawled on the floor, unconscious, but breathing. Scorch marks on the walls showed where weapons had been fired, but Kralven saw no bodies. The humans had used non-lethal force. More humans in armor were moving through the corridor, working in pairs. They moved like ghosts, checking corners, covering each other, communicating with hand signals. Kralven had seen many military forces during his career, but he had never seen anything move with such precision. They reached an airlock where a small human shuttle was docked. The airlock should have been locked and monitored, but somehow the humans had taken control of it. They loaded Kralven onto the shuttle and secured him in a seat. Within seconds, the shuttle detached and was accelerating away from the station. The entire operation took 18 minutes. Commander Vekthar finally reached his command center to find chaos. Reports were flooding in from sections 7A through 7D. Human forces had breached the station in 3 separate locations. They had used some kind of electronic warfare to disable communication and control systems. They had neutralized over 40 Vraxian security officers without killing any of them, and they had taken Kralven. "How many humans?" Vekthar demanded. "We believe 20 to 30, his second-in-command reported. "They used breaching charges and some kind of hacking device. They hit us fast and pulled out before we could respond. Track that shuttle. I want it intercepted." But even as he gave the order, Vekthar knew it was too late. The human shuttle was already clear of the station and accelerating toward a ship waiting in high orbit. His sensors were just now picking up that ship properly. It was small, lightly armed, nothing impressive. But it had done what no one thought possible. It had launched a military operation inside a council station and gotten away with it. Veltoth burst into the command center. "What happened? Where is Officer Kralven?" "The humans took him," Vekthar said, his voice tight with fury. "They violated council law, attacked a diplomatic station, and kidnapped a constabulary officer. Or they arrested a criminal who was being protected by diplomatic immunity," Commander Chen's voice said over the communication system. Somehow she had access to their command center's channels. "Officer Kralven is in human custody. He will face trial for assault on a minor under human law. Any attempt to interfere will be met with force." "You have no authority," Vekthar shouted at the screen. "This is an act of war." "No," Chen replied calmly. This is an arrest. You had the chance to hand him over peacefully. You chose not to. So we took him. If you want to call that an act of war, then I suggest you think very carefully about what happens next." On the screen, Vecthar could see sensor data updating. More human ships were appearing on the plot. 2 large destroyers and 4 frigates had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. They were moving into formation around the consequence. "You're outnumbered," Vecthar said, though his confidence was fading. "I can have 3 Vraxian warships here within the hour." "Then this will be a very short war," Chen said. "But ask yourself, Commander, do you really want to start a shooting war with Earth over one officer who assaulted a child? Do you think your government will thank you for that decision?" Vecthar cut the communication. He was furious, humiliated, and beginning to realize he was out of his depth. He immediately contacted the Vraxian military command and explained the situation. Their response was fast and aggressive. 3 Vraxian warships changed course and began heading toward Nexus Station 7 at maximum speed. Across the station, humans were gathering in their quarters and common areas, watching the news coverage of what was being called the Torrance Incident. Many were frightened. Some were proud. All of them understood that something important was happening. Marcus and Yuki watched from their apartment with Emma between them. When they saw Kralvin being carried onto the human shuttle, Emma grabbed her parents' hands tightly. "Are they going to hurt him?" she asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. "No, honey. They're going to make sure he faces justice. That's all. They're going to make sure what he did to you was wrong and that it has consequences." "Why didn't the station do that?" Emma asked. It was a child's question, simple and direct. Marcus didn't have a good answer for her. Yuki hugged her daughter close. "Because sometimes the people who are supposed to help us don't. But there are other people who will. That's what's happening now." On the consequence, Kralvin had been moved to a secure holding cell. A human medic had examined him to ensure he wasn't injured during the extraction. He was given water and food. The cell was clean and temperature-controlled. He was treated, he had to admit, better than many prisoners in Vraxian custody would have been. Lieutenant Park came to see him several hours after his capture. He carried a data tablet and sat down outside the cell. "Officer Kralvin, I am Lieutenant James Park, Judge Advocate General for the Human Defense Coalition. You are being charged with assault on a minor, specifically Emma Torrance. You have the right to legal representation. If you cannot afford representation, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights?" "I don't recognize your authority," Kralvin said. "I am a Vraxian officer with diplomatic immunity. You have kidnapped me illegally." "Your diplomatic immunity was based on the premise that you were acting in your official capacity," Park said calmly. "Striking a child who accidentally bumped into you is not an official duty. It's assault. You will be tried under human law because the victim was human. This is a mockery of justice." "No," Park said, his voice hardening slightly. "A mockery of justice is when a grown adult strikes an 8-year-old child and faces no consequences because of his rank. That's what a mockery of justice looks like. What's happening now is actual justice. You should hope you get a fair trial, because if it were up to the majority of humans on this ship, you'd be facing much worse." Park stood up. "A legal representative will be assigned to you tomorrow. The trial will begin within 72 hours. I suggest you think carefully about how you want to plead." In the council chambers, an emergency session had been called. Representatives from dozens of species were arguing about the human action. Some called it an outrage. Others were more cautious. The representative from the Keltharian Combine actually stood and spoke in favor of the humans. "For cycles, we have warned about the problems with diplomatic immunity," she said. "We have seen it abused. We have seen justice denied because powerful beings hide behind their status. The humans took action because we failed. Perhaps instead of condemning them, we should ask why we allowed this situation to develop in the first place." But the Vraxian delegation was demanding action. They wanted sanctions against Earth. They wanted the human ships ordered to leave immediately. They wanted Kralvin returned. Zixara tried to find a middle ground. Perhaps if the humans agree to release Officer Kralvin, we can discuss reforming the diplomatic immunity protocols. The response from Earth's ambassador was swift and cold. Officer Kralvin will face trial. That is not negotiable. If the Council wants to discuss reforms, we're happy to talk. But those talks will not change what happens to the being who assaulted a human child. He will be tried, and if found guilty, he will be sentenced. And if we demand his release? The Vraxian representative asked. Then you'll have to take him back by force, the ambassador replied. And I would strongly advise against that course of action. We gave you 24 hours to handle this diplomatically. You refused. Now it's being handled our way. The 3 Vraxian warships reached the edge of the system where the human vessels were positioned. The Vraxian commander sent a message demanding that the Consequence surrender Kralvin immediately. Commander Chen's response was short. No. The Vraxian ships moved forward, weapons powered up, clearly intending to intimidate the humans into compliance. That's when 6 more human warships dropped out of FTL travel. Then 8 more. Then 12 more. Within 20 minutes, the human fleet in the system had grown to nearly 30 ships. They formed a defensive sphere around the Consequence. The message was clear. If the Vraxians wanted Kralvin back, they would have to go through the entire human fleet to get him. The Vraxian commander stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Where did they all come from? His tactical officer checked the data. They were positioned in nearby systems, sir. They must have been pre-positioned before Commander Chen ever arrived at the station. This whole thing was planned. The commander felt his confidence drain away. The humans hadn't just extracted Kralvin on impulse. They had planned this operation carefully. They had brought enough force to fight their way out if necessary. They had meant every word of their warnings. He sent an urgent message back to Vraxian High Command. Sir, the humans have overwhelming force in the area. If we engage, we will lose. Requesting orders. The response took an hour. When it came, it was terse. Do not engage. Return to station. The Council will handle this through diplomatic channels. The Vraxian ships slowly turned and retreated. The humans didn't pursue them. They simply maintained their position, a clear statement that they weren't going anywhere. On the Consequence, Commander Chen allowed herself a small smile. Stand down from combat alert. Maintain defensive posture. Prepare for trial proceedings. One of her officers approached. Ma'am, the Council is requesting a meeting. They want to negotiate. Tell them we're happy to talk, Chen said. But make it clear that Kralvin stays in our custody regardless of what they say. He's going to trial. He's going to face justice. That is not up for negotiation. Lieutenant Park was already preparing the prosecution case. He had medical records, security footage, witness statements, and expert testimony. The evidence was overwhelming, but he knew this trial was about more than just one officer and one child. It was about setting a precedent. It was about making the galaxy understand that human children were protected. Kralvin sat in his cell, finally beginning to understand that this was really happening. The humans weren't bluffing. They weren't going to give him back. They had crossed the galaxy, conducted a military operation, and brought a fleet to ensure he faced consequences for his actions. For the first time since he struck Emma Torrance, Kralvin felt something he hadn't felt before: fear. The trial began exactly 72 hours after Kralvin's extraction, as Lieutenant Park had promised. The proceedings were broadcast across the human fleet and, with permission, to Nexus Station 7. The Galactic Council was also allowed to observe. Commander Chen wanted everyone to see that this would be a fair trial, conducted properly under established human law. The courtroom was set up in one of the Consequence's larger cargo bays that had been converted for the purpose. 3 judges sat at the front, all senior military legal officers. Kralvin sat at the defense table with his assigned lawyer, a human defense attorney named Marcus Reeves, who had actually volunteered for the job. Lieutenant Park sat at the prosecution table with his team. Commander Chen addressed the court first, establishing jurisdiction. This court is convened under the authority of the Human Defense Coalition to try charges of assault against a minor under Section 7 of the Unified Human Legal Code. The victim, Emma Torrance, is a human citizen. The defendant, Kralvin, has been charged with 1 count of assault causing bodily harm to a minor child. The presiding judge, a stern woman named Judge Martinez, looked at Kralvin. Does the defendant understand the charges against him? Reeves stood. Your Honor, the defense maintains that this court lacks jurisdiction over my client, who is a Vraxian citizen and was acting in his capacity as a law enforcement officer at the time of the incident. That motion has already been reviewed and denied, Judge Martinez said. This court has jurisdiction over crimes committed against human citizens. The diplomatic immunity claim has been rejected because striking a child who accidentally bumped into you is not a legitimate law enforcement action. Does the defendant understand the charges? Kralvin stood slowly. I understand that humans believe they can impose their primitive laws on superior species, he said. The courtroom went completely silent. Judge Martinez's expression didn't change, but her voice became ice cold. The defendant will show respect for these proceedings, or he will be held in contempt. Does the defendant understand the charges? Reeves quickly leaned over and whispered urgently to Kralvin. The Vraxian officer finally nodded. I understand the charges. How do you plead? Not guilty. The human spawn damaged my property. I administered appropriate discipline. I committed no crime. Let the record show the defendant pleads not guilty, Judge Martinez said. Lieutenant Park, you may present your case. Park stood and activated the holographic display. The first image was of Emma Torrance before the incident, smiling and happy. The second image was from the hospital, showing her swollen, bruised face and broken nose. Members of the court, the prosecution will prove beyond any doubt that the defendant, Officer Kralvin, committed assault on an 8-year-old child named Emma Torrance. We will show through medical evidence, security footage, and witness testimony that this assault was unprovoked, excessive, and caused serious injury to a minor who posed no threat. The first witness was the doctor who had treated Emma at the station hospital. He was a Pelthrian physician named Dr. Velnoth, who had 30 years of experience treating multiple species. Doctor, please describe Emma Torrance's injuries, Park said. The child had a broken nose, severe bruising to the facial area, a mild concussion, and psychological trauma. The force required to cause these injuries to a human child of her age and size would be approximately equivalent to being struck by a fast-moving vehicle. In your medical opinion, could these injuries have occurred from a simple fall? No. The injury pattern is consistent with a direct blow from a large hand or object. The child was struck deliberately and with significant force. The defense attorney tried to suggest that maybe Emma had injured herself in other ways, but the doctor's testimony was clear and unshakable. The medical evidence told an obvious story. Next came the security footage. Park played it on the large display for everyone to see. The silent video showed Emma chasing her robot pet, the accidental collision with Kralvin, the tablet falling and breaking, Emma immediately apologizing, and then Kralvin's hands striking her across the face with brutal force. Several humans in the courtroom had to look away. The judges watched without expression, but their eyes were hard. The footage speaks for itself, Park said. An 8-year-old child accidentally bumps into an adult. She apologizes immediately, and he strikes her with enough force to lift her off her feet. There is no question what happened here. Witness after witness testified. Some were humans who had been in the promenade that day. Others were aliens from various species. All of them confirmed the same basic facts. Emma had been chasing her pet. The collision was clearly accidental. She had apologized, and Kralvin had struck her without warning or provocation. One witness was particularly effective. She was an Avolian merchant named Kriath who had been standing very close to the incident. "I saw the whole thing," she said in her high, chirping voice. "The little one was playing as children do. She ran into the officer by accident. I could see she was frightened when she realized what she had done. She said sorry right away. The officer looked at his broken device, and then he just hit her. I have children of my own. What I saw was not discipline. It was cruelty." The defense attorney tried to discredit the witnesses by suggesting they were biased in favor of humans, but it didn't work. The testimony was too consistent and too clear. When the prosecution rested, Reeves stood to present the defense case. He called Kralvin to the stand. "Officer Kralvin, please tell the court what happened from your perspective." Kralvin straightened in his seat. "I was conducting my patrol duties when the human juvenile collided with me at high speed. She destroyed an expensive and irreplaceable data tablet that contained important work files. When I attempted to correct her behavior, she began crying and making a scene." "You say you corrected her behavior. What exactly did you do?" "I administered a disciplinary tap to get her attention and teach her to be more careful." Park stood up. "Objection. The medical evidence shows this was not a tap. This was a full-force blow that broke the victim's nose and caused a concussion." "Sustained," Judge Martinez said. "The defendant will describe his actions accurately." Reeves tried a different approach. "Officer Kralvin, in Vraxian culture, is it common to use physical discipline with young people who misbehave?" "Yes. We do not coddle our young the way humans do. We teach them responsibility and respect for authority. A small amount of physical correction is normal and expected." "So from your perspective, you were simply applying your cultural standards to correct a child's misbehavior?" "Exactly. The humans are simply too soft with their offspring. This is why they remain primitive." Park could see that this line of defense was actually hurting Kralvin's case, rather than helping it. The judges looked increasingly unsympathetic as the Vraxian officer continued to defend his actions and insult humans. When cross-examination began, Park approached slowly. "Officer Kralvin, you said the collision was at high speed. The victim weighs 32 kilograms. You weigh approximately 90 kilograms. Is that correct?" "Approximately, yes." "So a child 1/3 your size accidentally bumped into you. Did she injure you in any way?" "No, but..." "Did she threaten you?" "She destroyed my property." "By accident, correct? She immediately apologized, didn't she?" Kralvin hesitated. "She made sounds that might have been an apology." Park played the security footage again, this time with audio. Emma's voice was small and frightened, but clearly audible. "I'm so sorry, I didn't see you. I was chasing my robot and..." "That sounds like an apology to me," Park said. "She was scared, she was sorry, and she was trying to explain it was an accident, and you hit her anyway. She needed to learn respect." "Respect?" Park's voice rose slightly. "Or fear, because after you hit her, she was terrified of Vraxian officers. She couldn't leave her apartment for days. She had nightmares. Is that the lesson you wanted to teach an 8-year-old child? Fear?" Reeves objected, but the damage was done. Kralvin had essentially admitted that he hit Emma to teach her a lesson, not because he was threatened or defending himself. The defense tried to call character witnesses who testified that Kralvin was normally a good officer, but it didn't help much. The evidence was too clear. The victim was too sympathetic. And Kralvin's own testimony had revealed his contempt for humans and his belief that what he did was justified. During closing arguments, Reeves tried his best. "Members of the court, my client made a mistake. He reacted poorly to a stressful situation. But he was operating under his own cultural understanding of appropriate discipline. He did not intend to seriously harm the child. This is a case of cultural misunderstanding, not criminal assault. Park stood for his closing statement. He looked directly at the judges. Members of the court, this is not a cultural misunderstanding. This is not about different species having different approaches to child rearing. This is about a grown adult in a position of power deliberately striking a small child who posed no threat to him. Emma Torrance is 8 years old. She weighs 32 kilograms. She was chasing her pet robot and having fun, the way children do. She accidentally bumped into the defendant, and she immediately apologized. Park activated the display again, showing Emma's medical photos. The defendant hit her with enough force to break her nose, give her a concussion, and leave her traumatized. He did this not because he was threatened, not because he was defending himself, but because he was angry that his tablet got broken. He valued an object more than a child's well-being. The defendant has shown no remorse. He called Emma spawn and suggested she deserved what happened. He called humans primitive. He said we coddle our children too much. Well, maybe we do. Maybe we're unusual in the galaxy for how protective we are of our young, but I would rather be called soft than stand by while children are hurt. Park's voice grew harder. This court exists because the Galactic Council failed. They had a chance to provide justice to Emma Torrance. They chose not to. They hid behind diplomatic immunity and told a little girl and her parents that what happened to her didn't matter. That is why we're here. That is why Commander Chen brought a fleet. That is why the Human Defense Coalition will not back down. Because our children matter. Every single one of them matters. And anyone who hurts them will face consequences. I ask this court to find the defendant guilty and to sentence him appropriately. Not for revenge, but for justice. And to send a message to the galaxy that human children are protected. Always. The court recessed to deliberate. It took less than an hour. Judge Martinez read the verdict in a clear, strong voice. On the charge of assault causing bodily harm to a minor, this court finds the defendant, Officer Kralvin, guilty as charged. Kralvin stood up, his face showing shock. This is illegal. I am a Vraxian officer. You have no right. Sit down, Judge Martinez said coldly. You were a Vraxian officer. Now you're a convicted criminal. Sentencing will take place tomorrow. This court is adjourned. The broadcast of the verdict reached Nexus Station 7 within minutes. In their apartment, Marcus and Yuki held Emma as she cried. These were not tears of sadness, but of relief. Someone had finally said that what happened to her was wrong. Someone had finally made it matter. Across the galaxy, the news spread quickly. A human military court had tried and convicted a Vraxian officer for assaulting a child. The Galactic Council went into emergency session again, this time with a very different tone to the discussions. Administrator Veldtoth sat in his office, reading reports about human history and culture that he wished he had read weeks ago. He was beginning to understand something that most of the galaxy had missed. Humans weren't just dangerous because they came from a death world. They were dangerous because they cared so deeply about protecting each other, especially their young. That made them unpredictable and willing to take risks that other species would never consider. He sent a message to the Council. I recommend we accept the verdict and work with Earth to establish new protocols regarding juveniles. Further resistance will only escalate the situation. This time, people listened to him. 6 months had passed since what was now officially called the Torrance Incident in Galactic Council records. The galaxy had changed in small but important ways. Nexus Station 7 still functioned as a diplomatic hub, but the atmosphere was different now. The Vraxian constabulary still provided security, but their officers had gone through extensive retraining. New protocols were in place specifically addressing interactions with juveniles of all species. Every officer now carried a small card that listed the physical vulnerabilities of different species young. They were taught to recognize signs of distress in children and to prioritize de-escalation over discipline. Commander Vekthar had been quietly reassigned to a desk position on the Vraxian homeworld. His replacement, Commander Telkor, was younger and more flexible in his thinking. He had actually spent time studying human culture and had implemented many of the changes personally. Emma Torrance walked through the promenade now without fear. She still chased Zippy through the corridors, and other beings smiled when they saw her playing. When she passed Vraxian officers, they nodded politely and gave her plenty of space. Some even carried small treats that were safe for human children to eat, offering them as peace offerings. She had recovered physically within a few weeks, but the psychological healing had taken longer. She still had occasional nightmares, but they were becoming less frequent. Her parents had found her a good therapist, and slowly, Emma was learning to feel safe again. Marcus had returned to his security consultant work, though he was now treated with a mixture of respect and caution by station authorities. Everyone knew that he was the father who had restrained an officer who hurt his child. Everyone knew that when he had sent that message to Earth, the entire Human Defense Coalition had responded. Yuki had been promoted in her engineering division. Her supervisor, a cautious Pelthrian, had told her that the station's leadership wanted to show that they valued their human residents. Yuki had accepted the promotion, but remained cautious about trusting station authorities completely. The family had recently received a package from Commander Chen. Inside were several patches from the Consequence, a handwritten letter thanking them for their courage, and a small medal that Emma kept on her dresser. The letter had ended with a simple sentence: "You're brave, and you're protected, always." Emma video-called with Commander Chen once a month now. The commander had become an unofficial mentor, answering Emma's questions about military service, space travel, and what it meant to stand up for what was right. In their last call, Emma had told Chen that she was thinking about joining the diplomatic corps when she grew up. "That's a good choice," Chen had said, smiling. "We need people who understand both justice and mercy. People who have seen the worst but still believe in the best. I think you'd be excellent at it." Far away on a human prison station designated Facility 7, Kralven was serving his sentence. He had been sentenced to 15 years imprisonment, though he would be eligible for parole after 10 years if he showed genuine rehabilitation. He had also been permanently banned from entering human space and had received an official condemnation that was now part of his permanent record. The prison was not cruel, but it was firm. Kralven worked in the facility's maintenance division, learned to follow rules without the privilege of rank, and attended mandatory counseling sessions. His counselor was a patient human woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, who specialized in working with non-human inmates. "Do you understand yet why you're here?" she asked him during one session. "Because I struck a human child," Kralven said. He had stopped calling Emma spawn or juvenile after the first month. The other inmates, many of whom had children of their own, had made it very clear that such language would not be tolerated. "Yes, but do you understand why that was wrong?" Kralven was silent for a long time. "I have thought about this often. In my culture, physical discipline is normal, but I have learned that Emma Torrance was not my child to discipline. I was not her parent or guardian. I was a stranger who became angry and hit someone much smaller and weaker than myself because I valued an object more than I valued her well-being." It was the first time he had articulated it so clearly. Dr. Kim nodded slowly. "That's progress. Real progress. Tell me, if you could go back to that day, what would you do differently?" "I would not hit her," Kralven said immediately. "I would accept her apology. I would help her up if she had fallen. I would treat her with the kindness that children deserve, regardless of species." He paused, then added quietly, "I have seen the interview I gave, where I called her spawn and said she deserved it. I called humans primitive. I was wrong. I was arrogant and cruel, and a child suffered because of it. I am sorry." Dr. Kim made notes on her tablet. "Have you written to the family?" "Many times. They do not respond, and I understand why. But I continue to write. Even if they never read my letters, I write them. It helps me to remember what I did and to try to become better." In truth, the Torrance family did receive his letters. Yuki read each one carefully, watching for signs of genuine change. She didn't share them with Emma yet. The girl didn't need to think about Kralvin anymore. But Yuki kept them in a file, just in case someday Emma wanted to know that the person who hurt her had at least tried to understand his mistakes. The Galactic Council had undergone significant changes after the Torrance incident. The emergency sessions had lasted for weeks, with heated debates about human actions, diplomatic immunity, and the rights of juveniles across all species. The Vraxian delegation had initially demanded severe sanctions against Earth. They wanted trade restrictions, diplomatic penalties, and formal condemnation of the military action on Nexus Station 7. But their position became increasingly untenable as more details of the incident became public knowledge. Other species began sharing their own stories of diplomatic immunity being abused. The Keltharian representative presented 3 cases where Vraxian officers had used excessive force against Keltharian citizens with no consequences. The Evolians shared 2 similar incidents. Even some Vraxian civilians spoke up anonymously, describing a culture within the constabulary that prioritized authority over justice. Faced with growing evidence that the problem was systemic, the Vraxian government had quietly begun reforms. They had issued a public apology to Emma Torrance and her family, though it had been carefully worded to avoid admitting full liability. They had revised their diplomatic immunity laws to exclude violent crimes against juveniles of any species. And they had replaced several high-ranking constabulary commanders with officers who had better records of restraint and cultural sensitivity. The most significant change came when the Council passed the Juvenile Protection Mandate. It had taken 4 months of negotiation and compromise, but the final version was stronger than anyone had expected. The mandate established clear protections for young members of all species, defined appropriate use of force when dealing with juveniles, and created accountability mechanisms for violations. Ironically, Earth's unilateral action had achieved what years of diplomatic proposals had failed to accomplish. By showing they were willing to enforce their own standards when the Council failed, humans had prompted the Council to actually adopt similar standards system-wide. Admiral James Briggs of the Human Defense Coalition had given a widely broadcast interview about the incident. He was a veteran officer with gray hair and a calm demeanor that made him seem grandfatherly until you looked into his eyes and saw the steel there. "Some people have called our actions extreme," he said to the interviewer. "They say we overreacted. They say we should have accepted the Council's decision and moved on, but here's what they don't understand about humans. We are, as many species accurately note, Deathworlders. We come from a planet that spent millions of years trying to kill us. We evolved in an environment filled with predators, diseases, natural disasters, and countless ways to die. In that environment, every child was precious. We lived in small tribal groups where losing even one young person could threaten the survival of the entire group. So we developed deep, powerful instincts to protect our children. It's written into our psychology at the most fundamental level. You can't negotiate with it. You can't logic it away. When someone threatens a human child, every human within reach wants to respond." The interviewer had asked, "But Officer Kralvin wasn't threatening Emma Torrance in an ongoing way. The incident was over. Why not just pursue diplomatic channels?" Briggs had smiled coldly. "Because Emma is 8 years old. She's a child who was hurt by an adult in a position of authority, and that adult faced no consequences. The message that sends to every human is that our children aren't safe in Council space, that we can't trust Council justice to protect our young. That is not a message we can accept. Ever." "So you're saying humans will always respond with military force when one of your children is hurt?" "I'm saying we will always respond. We prefer diplomatic solutions. We tried that first. We gave them 24 hours. But when diplomacy fails and our children remain vulnerable, yes, we will use whatever means are necessary. Other species should understand that and plan accordingly. We're peaceful by preference, but we're Deathworlders by evolution. We know how to protect what's ours. The interview had been watched by billions across the galaxy. It had made some species nervous, but it had also made many parents from various species feel safer. If the humans were willing to go to such lengths for their own children, perhaps they would help protect everyone's children. Administrator Veltoth had published an academic paper called The Deathworlder Paradox: Why Humans Are Simultaneously Peaceful and Terrifying. It had become required reading in diplomatic training programs across the Council. The paper's key insight was that human protective instincts were both their greatest strength and what made them so dangerous to provoke. Humans could be friendly, cooperative, and patient in normal circumstances. But when they perceived a threat to their young or to those they considered under their protection, they transformed into something entirely different. Other species make cost-benefit calculations when deciding to use force, Veltoth wrote. Humans do this too, most of the time. But when children are involved, the calculation changes. The cost of action becomes almost irrelevant compared to the cost of inaction. This makes them unpredictable and extremely dangerous in specific circumstances. The wise diplomat learns to recognize these circumstances and avoid them entirely. The paper had been controversial, but it had also been correct. Other species began adjusting their behavior accordingly. 3 months after the verdict, another incident occurred on a distant trading station called Haven Point. A Keltharian merchant had struck a 14-year-old human boy who had been caught shoplifting from his store. The boy had been trying to steal food because his parents were between jobs and struggling financially. The merchant had only hit the boy once, leaving a bruise on his arm. It was far less severe than what happened to Emma. But the local human community responded immediately. Within hours, a peaceful protest had gathered outside the merchant's store. Human residents demanded he be arrested and charged. The station's security force, remembering what happened on Nexus Station 7, acted quickly. They arrested the merchant, contacted the boy's family, and initiated formal charges. The merchant was tried under the new juvenile protection mandate. He was found guilty and given a fine and community service sentence. More importantly, he was required to attend classes on interspecies cultural awareness and appropriate responses to juvenile misbehavior. The human community accepted this outcome. There was no call for military intervention. No fleet arrived to enforce justice. The system had worked as it should. This incident, and several others like it, showed that the precedent had been set. Station authorities across the galaxy now understood that juveniles, especially human juveniles, were to be treated with care and restraint. The threat of human military intervention was rarely needed anymore because the local systems were working. Commander Chen, still active in the Human Defense Coalition, received regular reports about these incidents. She kept a file of every case where the new protocols were followed successfully. She also kept a separate file of cases where they were not, ready to respond if necessary. "We don't want to be the galaxy's police force," she told her officers during a briefing. "That's not our job, but we will be the galaxy's reminder that children are precious and that hurting them has consequences. If we have to step in once a year or once every 5 years to enforce that lesson, we will. But I hope we won't have to. I hope the galaxy is learning." So far, the galaxy seemed to be learning. The number of incidents involving human juveniles had dropped dramatically. Part of that was better protocols and training. Part of it was fear of human response. But an unexpected part was that other species had started advocating for similar protections for their own young. The Evolian government had passed laws mirroring the juvenile protection mandate. The Pelthrians had created specialized training for anyone working with multi-species youth populations. Even the Vraxians, proud and slow to change, had implemented reforms. Emma's 8th birthday had been quiet, celebrated only with family and a few close friends. But her 9th birthday was different. The human community on Nexus Station 7 threw her a party in the main promenade. Hundreds of beings attended, bringing gifts and well wishes. Station Administrator Veltoth came personally to present Emma with a scholarship fund for her future education. On behalf of Nexus Station 7 and the Galactic Council, I want to apologize for what happened to you, he said formally. We failed you. We failed your family. We failed to provide the justice you deserved. The changes we've made since then are because of you. You helped make the galaxy safer for all children. Thank you. Emma, now 9 years old and more confident than she had been a year ago, smiled up at him. Thank you for saying sorry, and thank you for changing things. I don't want what happened to me to happen to anyone else. Yuki wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her daughter accept Veltoth's apology with grace and maturity. Marcus stood beside his wife, his arm around her shoulders, proud of the strong person their daughter was becoming. Commander Chen had sent a video message that was played at the party. Happy birthday, Emma. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I'm thinking of you. You showed courage when courage was needed. You helped change the galaxy just by being brave and refusing to accept injustice. That's what real strength looks like. I hope you have an amazing birthday, and I hope you know that you're protected. Always. That night, after the party ended and Emma was asleep, Marcus and Yuki sat together looking out at the stars. Do you think it's really over? Yuki asked quietly. For Emma? Yes, I think so. She's healing. She's happy again. The nightmares are rare now. I mean more broadly. Do you think the galaxy has really learned the lesson? Marcus considered this. Some have learned. Some are still learning. And some will never truly understand. But here's what I know. If something like this happens again, if someone hurts another human child somewhere in council space, there will be a response. Maybe not as dramatic as what Chen did for Emma. Maybe just local action or diplomatic pressure or economic consequences. But there will be a response. Because we're Deathworlders, Yuki said. Because we're parents, Marcus corrected. Because we're human. Because we protect our own. That's not about being tough or scary. It's about love. It's about knowing that every child matters and being willing to do whatever it takes to keep them safe. Yuki leaned against her husband, watching the ships move through the darkness. I'm glad we stayed. I thought about leaving after it happened, going back to Earth where Emma would be safer, but staying here, seeing the changes, knowing that Emma's suffering led to something good. I'm glad we stayed. Me too, Marcus said. And you know what? Emma told me yesterday that when she grows up, she wants to work to help different species understand each other better. She wants to prevent things like what happened to her from happening to other kids. She wants to build bridges. Of course she does, Yuki said, smiling through tears. That's exactly who she is. Far away on Earth, in the headquarters of the Human Defense Coalition, a new protocol had been added to the operational guidelines. It was called the Torrance Protocol, and it outlined the steps to be taken when a human juvenile was harmed in foreign space and local authorities failed to respond appropriately. The protocol emphasized diplomatic solutions first, but it also authorized military intervention if necessary. It had been approved at the highest levels of human government. The message was clear and permanent. Human children were sacrosanct. Anyone who forgot that would face consequences. A young officer reading the protocol for the first time asked her supervisor, "Has this protocol been used since the original incident?" "No," the supervisor said. "It's been 6 months and we haven't needed it. You know why? Because the galaxy learned. One incident, One trial, one clear demonstration that we meant what we said, and behavior changed across thousands of systems. That's not just military power, that's the power of setting a precedent. But we'd use it again if we had to, right? In a heartbeat, the supervisor said. And every species out there knows it. That's what keeps it from being necessary. That's what protects every human child living in foreign space, the certain knowledge that if someone hurts them, there will be consequences. Emma Torrance was now applying to the Youth Diplomatic Program, a prestigious school that trained young people interested in interspecies relations. Her application essay had been simple and powerful. A year ago, something bad happened to me. A person in authority hurt me, and the systems that were supposed to protect me failed. But then other people stepped in. They came from far away to make sure I was safe and to make sure justice was done. They taught me that when systems fail, people who care can make a difference. When I grow up, I want to be one of those people. I want to help build systems that don't fail in the first place. I want to help different species understand each other so that accidents don't become incidents, and incidents don't become conflicts. I want to build bridges, not walls. And I want every child in the galaxy to know they're protected and valued, no matter where they come from. The admissions committee approved her application unanimously. One of the reviewers wrote a note in her file. This young woman has already changed the galaxy once. I believe she'll do it again. In the end, the Torrance incident became a turning point. It was studied in diplomatic schools, referenced in council debates, and remembered as the day the galaxy learned an important lesson about humanity. Not that humans were violent or aggressive, but that they were protective, fiercely, unconditionally, irrationally protective of their young. And in a dangerous galaxy where threats could come from anywhere, where accidents could have terrible consequences, and where the strong often preyed on the weak, having someone willing to enforce protection wasn't such a bad thing. The Deathworlders from Earth had reminded the galaxy of an old truth that many had forgotten. Children were precious, all children, from all species. They were the future, the innocent, the vulnerable, and they deserved to be protected, sometimes by laws and systems and diplomatic agreements, and sometimes by people willing to cross the galaxy to enforce consequences personally. But always, always protected.